And this is particularly important for club and district officers, SLP advisors, chairs, chaperones, but something that all of our club members need to be trained on throughout the year, or at least annually. Okay, next slide, Leah. So these are our learning objectives. We're going to talk about why youth protection is so important to our organization and to our members. What they call the ABCs of youth protection. They're easy to read, to remember it. Accessible, high quality training and resources, background checks and beyond in the culture of care, some tips for club success, and then the Kiwanis contact information. Next slide. So why does youth protection matter so much? We know that these are our SLPs, our service leadership programs that we have in Kiwanis. And if you look at the number of members, you can see by these numbers that we work with hundreds of thousands of kids worldwide just through our service leadership programs, not including the other things that we may be working with, other volunteer programs that your clubs might be working with in the community, whether it be boys and girls homes, boys and girls clubs, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, whatever organization it is with the, in addition to that your club may be working with. And these students really depend on us to help protect them. To be fair, when you are an organization that is focus is children, you might attract people to the organization that have nefarious purposes and interests. We broadly talk about how much we work with children and what great things we do. And unfortunately, there are some people out there who don't have good intentions. Next slide. So when talking about why youth protection matters, the fact of the matter is that when we know information, we can share it and educate the kids that we work with. And when people know that these kids have been educated on this topic, they're less likely to target those youth. And this is all research-based. And education also increases disclosures, which leads to interrupting additional abuse to get more youth getting help. Next slide. So who experiences abuse? So the World Health Organization's facts from 2022 indicate that worldwide during childhood up to the age of 18, under the age of 18, that across all ages, all socioeconomic levels, ethnicities, genders, big communities, small communities, abuse happens everywhere and anywhere. And worldwide, 1 in 5 girls reports being sexually abused in their childhood, and 1 in 13 boys reports being sexually abused in their childhood. And these are only people or only kids that have reported it. So the actual numbers are estimated to be much, much higher because of how often it does not go reported. Next slide. So this says youth may know their abusers. So nearly 90% of abusers are people that children know and trust. You know, when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, it was, we were worried about stranger danger, you know, people in white panel vans offering us candy or to pet their puppy. And while those things happened, in the vast majority of cases, it was people that the kids already loved and trusted, that they knew, people that they knew, not strangers. You know, they might meet them at camp, at school, sports programs, church, on the internet. And so you can see those numbers. So where does abuse, next slide, where does abuse happen? So this is what we know. It can happen anytime. It's typically in privacy, one-on-one interactions between youth and adults. And so later we'll talk about the rule of 3. And so that's why that's important. We don't one-on-one interactions to avoid. Where does it happen? It could be in the bathroom, at the camp, at the school, at the church. Could be while transporting the kids, hotels, locker rooms, or it could be online. And there are some policies we'll talk about that relate to being online, because there's room for abuse there, and texting, sexting, pornography, use of social media sites. Predators use all of these access to groom and assert emotional control over vulnerable kids. We're involved with kids during school, after school, overnight activities, camps, Key Club, all kinds of things. And this education helps us to be aware of what we need to look for, what we need to be aware of. Next. So when I was talking about abuse happening online, a lot of people might think that if it is not in person or not touched, that it's not abuse. And I don't think that's true. Studies show that it's not true. There's bullying, grooming, solicitation online. Even online, 80% of the perpetrators are known to the victims. They can be exposed to visually explicit material, offline contact. They could display themselves as minors when they're really not. Use access, particularly kids, if they're online and lonely, are going to be susceptible to this. And this is odd to me, but sexual topics are often introduced on the first day of contact, the first time they contact the students online. And a lot of them then take the conversations offline, so it's not public, it's not visible. And minors who have sexual relationships offline typically consider it consensual, even though the power dynamics are so different. And if it's an adult, they may not be aware that that's actually abuse and it's not their fault. So next slide. How abuse affects youth. And it can affect them for the rest of their lives, not just while the abuse is happening, but long after it ends. It may cause trust issues. They may think it's their fault, or that they could have stopped it, or they did something to cause it to happen to them, for them to be targeted. They can feel or act out as angry, sad, guilty, confused, mood swings, lose interest in the activities that they previously enjoyed, and including act out in sexual ways. Next slide. So youth protection, Kiwanis put in some youth protection guidelines, and our goals of this are to protect, educate, and engage all Kiwanis members, youth and adults. So you'll see some things that Kiwanis also does that are directed towards youth. We want to protect our youth from predators. We want to provide them with the skills and tools designed to inspire and engage them to be their best, and to empower and educate adult members with best practices when working with youth. So that's part of the things we'll go through tonight, are what you do if you suspect something is happening. Next slide, Leah, please. So how do we meet our goals? Well, we follow our Kiwanis Youth Protection Guidelines that were put in place. And by following those, we can prevent that adult to youth abuse and peer-to-peer abuse between the students as well. We'll identify concerning behaviors, understand how we monitor and supervise youth, how we report emergencies or red flag incidents, and how we model safe and appropriate behaviors. And I think sometimes the modeling is so underestimated of how important it is for these kids and students to see what a respectful relationship is like. How they may not have people in their home or people around them that respect boundaries, that can disagree in a reasonable way, an appropriate way. So, sorry, that was my dog that sneezed. So that's, modeling appropriate behaviors is so important. Relationships between adults and between, what to expect from how other adults should be reacting to them. Next slide, Leah. So the three main pillars, we call those the youth protection ABCs. The A is for accessible, high quality training and resource. The B is for background checks and beyond. And C is the culture of care. So that's how they want you to easily remember your ABCs. Next slide. So the first one was accessible training. And so at our district convention, we have forums or workshops or tables with materials at our conventions and our mid-year conference that have information on youth protection policies, handouts with the youth protection policies on it, forums and workshops talking about youth protection. There are also, Chris and I are your youth protection managers. We can help train clubs virtually and in person. I will tell you, these slides are available to you. These slides are actually, these slides are actually off of the Kiwanis International website. You can download them and use them. This is being recorded and will be made available that you can use to show in your club. Or there's one that Kiwanis International did that's available on the Kiwanis website that you can use and just show to your club as well. And there are some materials that I'll talk about that you can download and use as well. Next page. Oh, people are listening. Can you be polite? So sorry. I'm home from work and it's playtime. So accessible club training. So what we want to do is we have club level annual protection youth policy training. Just a moment. I cannot with you right now, honey. We want to have club training. So your club is expected to inform and educate its member on the guidelines, what these guidelines are. You can use these slides or the video of the webinar or both. And the club secretary will actually report. There's a little box your club secretary should be aware of. And you can kind of see it on the screen, but it's hard to see. On the main page of the secretary reporting, there is a box that says if your club has received the youth protection guideline training, and your club secretary checks it. It's on the main screen. They only have to check it once. They don't have to check it every month on the reports, just one time, and it stays there the full year. Now, there is a 2-page workshop, or the policies are printed on a 2-page piece of paper, and you can print those off and share those with your club members. And that also counts as the youth protection training, as long as you've shared the information with them and gone over it a little bit. One question that I get a lot is, do all members have to be present for the club training? I will say, if your clubs ever have a meeting that every single one of your members are at, I'm impressed and I want to be a member of your club because you're doing something amazing. It's going to be hard for most clubs to have every member there. So you don't have to guarantee that every member has watched the training or listened to you. But if you can just distribute the 2-page so they know what the policies are, that helps. And as long as you have it and discuss it in a meeting, your secretary can check that box and it's considered done.
Dawn.
Yes, sir.
Could if I could just throw something in here, and just very quickly, one of the first things I did when John and Dawn and Leah asked me to be your co-manager this year is I went to look at the Kiwanis International Policies and Procedures and look at the written guidelines. And so if you just do a Google search for Kiwanis International Policies and Procedures, the two are, in this case, what I was looking at is about 2.5 to 3 pages. The Youth Protection Guidelines are policy number 432, and they're found on pages 130, 131, and 132. It's just over 2 pages of the Kiwanis International policies and procedures. And they're all spelled out, just like education, the one that Don is discussing. Every Kiwani is expected to inform and educate its members on these guidelines, best practices, what individuals must do when aware of youth in potentially harmful situations. The education must occur annually, including providing a copy of these guidelines to each club member. So I think it would be great for each club and the club secretary to have, as Don suggests, a copy of that 2.5 page youth protection guidelines. And it could be handed out to every member. It could be handed out at your annual meeting of your club. You could have copies where you check in at your meeting and get your name badge and have copies there. There are a number of things you could do. You could give a copy of it to every member when they join your club as part of their orientation. But I think it would be very helpful to everyone to look at and read those guidelines. It doesn't take long. That's where you'll find them, policy 432. Thank you, Don.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. When so the next slide, Leah. There we go. So in addition to doing a background check, which we'll talk about, you have to do presidiumacademy.com. There are online youth protection courses. And I will tell you that this is Presidium. Some of you may be familiar with it. When I joined the vestry of my church, I had to take Presidium classes also that were church related. But it's so they do a lot of different trainings, all related to youth protection. So you can see the course listings that are there. And if you're across the top, it'll show whether you're a youth protection manager, if you're the DA or an advisor for CKI or Builders Club or K Kids or Action Clubs, or if you're just a member, or if you're a chaperone, if you're going to be chaperoning something, this will show you what courses you will have to take. Now, when you sign up, you'll give them what your title is, and they'll present you with the courses you have to take. You don't have to remember this, but it just shows you what some of them are. Risk management, social media safety, preventing sexual activity among adolescents, duty to report, meet Sam, it happened to me, and monitoring and supervision. So there are a lot of different short classes that are informative on the specifics. Next slide. So when you go to Presidium, how to log in, you can initiate your own account, or if you are signed up as an advisor, you may get a link. So when you go to your own personal Kiwanis portal, it'll look like that when you sign into your name, and you can click Create Presidium Account. If it says there's an error when you click that, means that at some point you probably already have an account, and you can go directly to the Presidium website to do your work. Then you check your email for an invitation to access your account, and you can go from there. If you have any problems or questions that persist about how to do this, you can also email youthprotection@kiwanis.org. And that email is going to be at the end of this slide too, but it's youthprotection@kiwanis.org, and they can help you get that set up also. Next slide. And I've talked about this already, but this recorded webinar with my dog out of control, a recorded webinar on the Kiwanis website, these PowerPoint slide decks that you have access to, and these were updated this year in January, so these are their most current ones. They update them periodically. And then when you just type in Kiwanis Youth Protection, it'll take you to what you can see here on the screen, where it has youth protection trainings, policies and procedures, Youth Protection Week, which we are in. It's at the beginning of October, the beginning of our Kiwanis year, because it's so important to Kiwanis. They put it as at the beginning of the Kiwanis year. But all of those resources are there. How to do background checks, all of that stuff is on the Youth Protection on the Kiwanis website. Next slide. So there's also a lot of questions we get asked about background checks. So if you do a background check, it's good for 2 years. If you know you're going to be chaperoning something, you need to do your background check at least 2 weeks in advance. I will tell you, you have to update it every 2 years. When I went on mine to update it, I clicked on it, I filled in the information. It took less than a couple minutes. And I got the results the next day that I was clear. But if they need additional information from you, or it's a particular busy time of year, it may take a little longer. So make sure to give them that time. Kiwanis contracts with Safe Hiring Solutions, Safe Visitor online application portal. I will tell you, they do actually. So a lot of the questions we get are, does it have to be a Kiwanis International background check? And the answer is yes. And here's one of the reasons. So, I have one for work. I have one for church volunteer. I have one for school volunteer. Don't those count? They don't. It needs to be through Safe Hiring Solutions. And this is one of the differences, is that they search the county, state, providence, and the national crime records. For a lot of things in South Carolina, they'll just check the SLED website, which is South Carolina Law Enforcement Division. So this will catch people who have moved or may have a criminal history in another state. So that's one of the important reasons that we want to do it. And we're not California residents, but if you were, there's something different. Next slide. So how to get your background check. Your secretaries can go on, you can share this information with them, or you can go to the Youth Protection at Kiwanis.org. There's a little envelope icon next to the name that'll generate it and send it to the person themselves to fill out the information for the background. And always tell people if they don't get it to check their spam folder, because sometimes important things go in there. So we do have a cost for the background checks. Next slide, Leah. There is a cost for the background checks. It did go up to, used to be $25. Now it's $35 for SLP advisors, Kiwanis and faculty, official event chaperones. And it actually costs more than that, but the remaining cost is subsidized by Kiwanis Youth Program. So the cost to your club will be $35. So your club can either set up an account and pay it, or you can pay and they can reimburse you. This is something that your club can pay for out of their account. And remember, it says at the bottom, only background checks conducted through Kiwanis International are accepted. Next slide. So this tells you who has to have a background check. If you're an event chaperone, you have to have a background check, review the youth protection policy. YP is youth protection. Review the youth protection policy annually. So you'll see all of them are marked that, because every Kiwanian should be reviewing the youth protection policy every year. So it tells you who has to have a background check and how many courses they might have to take if someone asks. Next slide. Other important policies. Next slide, Leah. So when we're chaperoning events, there are ratio requirements. And for instance, if it is Key Club District Convention, this is something that Scott Johnson knows backwards and forwards, and he will make sure that it is done correctly. Single day event, you have to have at least one background checked adult for 50 youth. So if you are at school on school property, you don't need to worry about this. If you are somewhere off campus, and you have 50 kids, for instance, you're going to Carowinds for fall rally or something like that. There has to be at least one background checked adult for 50 youth. And so when we say background checked adult, by adult, we mean somebody who's 21 years of age or older. So Circle K members can serve as chaperones if they're 21 or older, have had the background check and everything. Circle K members that are under 21 can volunteer but cannot be counted as a chaperone. So your chaperones are background checked adult, 21 or older. If it's an overnight event, you have to have, so think Key Club Decon, Key Leader. You have to have one adult male to supervise no more than 10 youth males, one adult female to supervise no more than 10 youth females. So if you have 5 male attendees and 5 female attendees, you have to have one adult male and one adult female that has been background checked. If you have 11 boys attending, you have to have 2 adult males. It's for no more than 10 because you're 10 plus 1, that means 2 adults. And the adults cannot share sleeping quarters with students unless it's their child, or if it's a bunkhouse camp cabin setting. So instance in Key Leader, in the past, they've had these huge bunkhouses. When I've chaperoned that, I've, had to beg a student to swap a lower bunk for me. So they didn't laugh at me when I climbed up, but you can be in there if it's a bunkhouse with a lot of people or it's your own child. Next. So these are best practices. So no matter what the minimum requirements are, if we can go beyond that, we want to, and that's considered a best practice. That you always have 2, 3, or more background checked adults per activity, regardless of whether or not you have 50 students or whatever. You just want people around to supervise, monitor, have eyes on everybody, have eyes on everything, to check in with the students regularly or the other member or the other chaperones to make sure everything's okay. And if you have a situation that the chaperone has to deal with, if you only have one for those 50, which is the minimum, if that one is dealing with some situation, you still have, other people, other background check chaperones that are watching what's going on. But it depends on what you're doing. Having 2 or 3 or more adult chaperones, the more adults that are around that are trained, really discourages the inappropriate one-on-one opportunities, or that somebody with nefarious intentions would feel like that's a place where they could take advantage of that. And it holds everybody accountable for the code of conduct and everything that's going on. Next slide. So obviously during COVID, we had a lot of virtual club events. We all started having a lot, and Key Clubs and Circle Ks and other clubs started having them too. So similar with in-person activities, whether you have 3 members or 80, you still need to have background checked adults in those virtual programs. You want to make sure somebody's just there to keep an eye on what's going on, who's talking to who, that the conversations are appropriate, that kind of thing. Next slide. So protecting youth is our highest priority. However, we also want to be careful about being alone with youth or having too few chaperones to prevent any kind of false allegations. You don't want anybody making a false allegation either. You want to remain in an area where other adults and youth can see you. If you're tutoring one-on-one, you still want to be preferably in sight and sound of other people. Don't go into the bathroom alone with a kid. Take a couple of kids with you. Stand outside if they go in the bathroom. And it says avoid physical contact. So if you've met me, you know I am a hugger. And that is something I really have to be careful about with kids and with the other adults. Because even if it feels playful or loving, to me, when I do it, it can feel very unwelcome or inappropriate to the person receiving it. So you really just, beyond a pat on the back or are you okay kind of thing. Next slide. So Kiwanis does have policies regarding social media, and those are listed here. So social media connections. So you should never initiate, follow, friend, or like posts or pages of individual youth. I'm an assistant district administrator for Circle K. I would never send a friend request to one of our students. If they want to send me a friend request, that's fine. I may or may not accept it. But you should never be the one initiating those, because with the power imbalance, a student may not feel like they cannot not. I don't mind leaving people in limbo or not accepting friend requests. The students may not feel like they can do that. What you should be doing is connect by the SLP club page and account and not the individual members' accounts. So if, Emerald High School has a key club and they're posting pictures, I can follow the Emerald High School Key Club, but I shouldn't be asking to friend the individual members. If you want to repost something, just to get the news out and to share it, which is always helpful. Hey, we're having a fundraiser. Share it from, you can share it, but share the club's actual, Emerald High School's Key Club Facebook page or Instagram account. Share that, not an individual student's. Social posts, you really want to treat everything and interactions as a professional and public. And on even posting photos, you need to get the parent or the guardian's permission. Never post on your personal social media, only shared on a club page. So for example, and here's how we've done it. So Emerald High School may post something about the Emerald Key Club. The high school has permission to post all of those students' pictures. If I'm not sure whether we have permission or not, our club has permission, I can share the high school's posting of that page. Our club, Greenwood, the Greenwood Kiwanis Club can repost the Emerald High School Key Club's page or the Emerald High School's page on those. And the third one is the rule of three, which I said we would get to. You really want to avoid one-on-one, even youth to adult texts, emails, or phone calls by adding another person. If you are communicating with your club president, you'll want to include, if you're the Kiwanis advisor, you'll want to include the school advisor on that, or another Kiwanian on that. You never want to have one-on-one so that there's no question about what was said or what was sent.
An example of that is when I was governor, and I was a COVID governor, so much of it was Zoom. And I might receive an email from the Key Club governor asking me if I would appear before maybe one of their board meetings and talk for a few minutes on a particular topic or whatever. Um, when I would reply to that person, I always replied and copied, made sure that on that email I copied Scott Johnson, administrator for all the key clubs, and I would typically copy also the Carolinas District Key Club officers. Yeah, and so everyone knew what the communication was and that type of thing. Never communicate directly with one person.
So for instance, if that they had the Key Club governor had forgotten and sent Chris an email just directly, when he replied, he would attach those other people in his reply. Just so it was really clear about what was going on. So one of the things that gets a little tricky is people be like, a lot of my son's friends I've known since they were little, not because they were in Key Club or whatever club, in Kiwanis they were a part of. You can still maintain those relationships only if it predates and it's okay with their parents. But I will say this, so the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children received close to 85 million online files containing child sexual abuse materials in 2021, 85 million. And so that's why we want all of our interactions between youth and adults to remain public. So there's no question that we are not part of that 85 billion. That's not what Kiwanis is about. Next page. So transportation. So our best practices in transportation is you should have at least 3 people in the car, either an adult and 2 students or 2 adults and a student. That's again avoiding that one-on-one, even like we talked about with texts, that is the same for in the car. That you get the parent or guardian's approval prior to transporting. For instance, I have transported children to Key Leader or students to Key Leader before. We have met in a public place. I had them meet at the same time so both kids could get in my car at the same time. We met at the movie theater parking lot. I met the parents, gave them my cell phone number. And one thing I would do is make sure the parents have your cell phone number and make sure that if you can do, I didn't have this at the time, but now there are some, if you're in Waze or some of the other ones, you can share your location while you're driving with that parent if they want it, so that they know you're on the road or if you've stopped at a gas, that kind of thing, so that they know where their child is. And it's not, it's not to encourage a helicopter parent. It's to protect yourself and those students. Should something happen, should there be any question about, what was going on. Next slide. So when we talk about medication, and this is usually something, that they can possess prescription and non-prescription medicines only with written permission from their parent or guardian. And during overnight stays, you need to keep the parent or guardian signed medical forms safe and accessible for emergencies. So, for instance, in Circle K, all the students have signed releases. Jennifer keeps everything super organized in a binder so that you can find it if something happens and somebody needs to go to the doctor. But again, when I think of overnight, and maybe some clubs are doing overnight things, but generally it's the Key Leader and Key Club District Convention where you have the, trained Key Leader chaperones and Scott Johnson really in charge of everything.
I attended the Action Club District Convention one year at Camp Walter Johnson. And they always have medical staff there because some of the Action Club members may have medical issues. And I remember specifically we're in the convocation area and all the activities are going on and everything else. And the nurse was sitting right there with a metal lockbox. And inside that lockbox, she had information on every single attendee and had it there, medical information and all the consent forms, everything else. She had it right there and keeping guard on it, but having it present in case she needed it.
Can never be too safe. Next slide, Leah. So if you observe or learn of behavior that's inappropriate, unsafe, violates the policies we're talking about, or is illegal, even if the event has passed and then you learn about it, please report it. So if you see something or if you hear something, then you must say something because it could prevent further harm for that student and protect other students that could fall prey to the same person. You don't have to know it's true. I may be jumping ahead of myself, but if it bothers you, you need to report it. Next slide. So the first step is you're going to stop imminent danger. So if there's imminent danger, somebody's being beat up, something's happening, or a threat's ongoing, stop the harm from occurring and call 911. Next step and the next slide is going to be contact the event leader. So if it's key leader or, it's going to be Lori Napier. If it's key club, it's going to be Scott Johnson. You're going to contact that person and decide whether you or the person needs to report the incident. Next slide. There is a youth protection helpline, and it is run by Presidium Incorporated, which works, like I said, with all kinds of organizations. So this is staffed 24/7. This is not staffed by Kiwanis International. This is staffed by Presidium folks. So you can keep this number in your phone. Always have it with you when you're working with kids. Before you call them, you can call them. I don't know if I should report this. I don't, you can just, not know what to do, and you can call them and they can walk you through it. Gather notes before you call. When did it happen? Any information about who was involved, any action that was taken, just what you know. You don't have to do investigation, just share with them what you know. And anyone can call that helpline, including the students, your club members, chaperones, parents, and you can remain anonymous when you call too if you don't want to give. Next slide. So after you follow whatever recommendations the helpline gives you, including if you should report it to law enforcement, you need to contact the following as might be appropriate. The club's Kiwanis advisor, faculty advisor, the sponsoring school, parent or guardian of the affected youth, the International Youth Protection Team. There's that youth protection again. And you want to follow any laws regarding reporting that you might need to do. Next. In terms of addressing the incident, you're going to be guided by the folks at Presidium. What they tell you to do is going to be the best practice of what you should do. You're going to address the incident with the people or person who made or accused of making the violation, as well as the youth that was targeted. You might talk to people who witnessed it. Remember to protect the privacy. Did you see anything going on? You don't have to mention specific names, just did you see anything going on? And sometimes if kids see, somebody else being injured or harmed or bullied, even witnessing that can cause real trauma. And so the Presidium hotline can advise you on what to do in that scenario as well. Next slide. So this says, if you need additional support or guidance, contact your district administrator or district youth protection manager. I would say go ahead and just contact your district. If it's a key club incident, contact Scott Johnson. He's been doing this for years. He's probably seen, more than we'll ever know and had to handle, and could be a real wealth of information there, and needs to know what kinds of things are going on. And then Chris and I are always available, and the folks at Kiwanis are always available too to help walk through anything. Next slide. So here are some important reminders. You need to maintain confidentiality of both the person who did the accusation, the person who was accused, and anybody else. You need to maintain confidentiality. Remember, you're not an investigator. You're just a support and guide. You're trying to find information, but you're not going to be the one investigating the case. If there's something, there will be other people who are trained professionals to do that. And you're not a judge. Just record and report the information. You don't need to interpret it. Just write down so-and-so said this. And this is also what is important, is if inappropriate behavior or abuse is reported to you, please be sure your response is one of accepting the information and showing empathy. Don't just immediately deny that it could have possibly happened. George would never do that. You're wrong. Take the information, show empathy that, you're sorry this happened to them. And sometimes people may think that what was reported, I might think that what was reported to me may not be true, or that it doesn't sound like it's a really big deal to me. However, the report still needs your action, and the person needs your support, and the person reporting it needs your support and empathy, because what may seem inconsequential to me can be really traumatic to another person. We don't know what other people have been through in their lives. And just take the information and pass it along. You don't have to pass judgment on the person involved. Next slide. So one of the things Kiwanis is doing to see the culture of care, we know that our student leaders are our biggest resources. So when we provide them with the education and the resources, they can be the ones to help prevent bullying, be an upstander. And we can share all of this information with them, respecting personal boundaries, understanding healthy communication. Next slide. So SLPs offer member training and awareness for the culture of care. There's a curriculum, there are activities, their meeting guidelines, their sessions on promoting healthy boundaries in relationships, preventing bullying. And this training can be presented at the Youth Protection webpage, International Convention, ICON International Convention training workshops, GATSI, which is the training for the governor and administrator training conference, GATSI, Governor and Administrator Training Conference, workshops, and the International iBoard International Board training. So a lot of those receive this particular training that are leaders in their club and in the organization. Next slide. One of the things that when we get when Kiwanis does surveys and asks the students what they want, a lot of it these days revolves around mental health issues. Depression is the most common mental health disorder among teens. The rates of depression have increased substantially in the past decade. And it says 3 or 4 teens with depression also have diagnosed anxiety and have behavior problems. And you'll see Erica's Lighthouse. And on the next page, we'll talk about that. So the next page. So Kiwanis has partnered with some mental health partners and resources. So for Circle K or CKI, Circle K International, they're partnered with Active Minds. They provide assistance to the college students. Key Club partners with Erica's Lighthouse, Beacon of Hope, which we saw Erica's Lighthouse on the previous slide. They have teen empowerment videos, teen mental health awareness, depression education, and Builders Club and K Kids partner with Project Happiness, which has student handbooks, videos, and a pay it forward activity. So Kiwanis is really trying to provide those resources that the kids that we work with need. Next slide. So I would say that tips for your club success is that your club secretaries should consistently monitor the background check status of their club's Kiwanis advisors. So when your secretary logs onto the dashboard, it'll list the club officers, it lists what SLPs your club sponsors, who the Kiwanis advisor is, and whether or not their background check is current. And if it's not, they can send them a reminder. You need to watch your club may sponsor one or more key clubs or builders club or action clubs. And you really need to monitor if you have current Kiwanis advisors for each of those clubs. If you have multiple key clubs, somebody for each key club. That if somebody leaves, that you just not have an advisor for that club. You need to have somebody in your club designated that needs to be entered in the secretary's dashboard. And it also ensures that their background check shows whether or not they've had it. And remind your clubs that, it's $35 for the background check. If you have multiple people that are SLP advisors, if you're a club that does amazing work with SLPs, you may have more than one person, and that can come out of your club budget if your club wants to pay for that. And the next slide just has, if you have questions about background checks, send it to backgroundchecks@kiwanis.org. If you have questions about youth protection at kiwanis.org. Culture of care at Kiwanis.org if you want to learn more about that, or you can go onto the Kiwanis website and just type in youth protection. It'll take you to that page where there's an awful lot of information out there for you. And if you want to reach out to me, my email is kiwanisdawn@gmail.com. I don't think it's I saved it as, I don't think I can enter it, Leah, because I saved it as a whatever I saved it as. I'm sorry, y'all, I'm tired. Questions. That was a lot of information. Questions. Does anybody have questions? Now I can see everybody. That was weird.
There are no questions in the chat at this moment. So if you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself and ask Dawn.
And I know that was a lot of information that we just threw at you, but it's important information. Again, you have access to all of these slides. There's a wealth of information. You can reach out to Chris or I anytime.
I put my email address in the chat. And Kiwanis says there's nothing more important than the safety of the children Kiwanis serves. That's pronto, preeminent. That's how they begin. And that's what the focus of Don's presentation has been in the video. But it's not just for the children's protection. It's for your protection. It's for all the members of your club's protection. I know I have been at district conventions and Kiwanis international conventions where they would have either the executive at Kiwanis International responsible for risk management come and give a presentation, or I've also been where they would have someone from Highland Insurance come and give a presentation, and they talk about claims made against Kiwanis's insurance policy. And it's only a very small number of claims that relate to the physical abuse of children in number, but the vast majority of dollar claims and the vast majority, the vast number of claims paid by our insurance carrier deal with these kind of issues. So while the main focus is the protection of the children and youth that we serve and collaborate with, it is also for your protection. It is for your club's protection. It's for your insurance coverage, etc., that we go through these things.
Well, thank you.
That's good if nobody has questions.
They're still processing.
I know.
I have one thing, Leah, that I'd like to read from the guidelines. It's the very last one, and it's very short, but I think it's also important, and it's conflict with other rules. And it says this: whenever these guidelines conflict with local school policies or rules, or local, state, provincial, like Canada, provincial or national laws or regulations, the highest applicable standards for conduct shall prevail. So we're not just looking at, you shouldn't look at anything like what's the minimum we can get by with. The Kiwanis International guidelines are we should pursue the highest standards. And I think that's something we should keep in mind.
Well, we're gonna put everything in a good place this weekend coming up because we have the Key Club Fall Rally in Charlotte.
That's right. That's right.
Carowinds.
You'll have kids coming out of your ears. So much fun. They are so energetic.
Is that it?
Well, we appreciate everyone being here this evening. If you think of a question, you can send it to Dawn or Chris, or if you have, you thought of your question and you just received CD News, you can reply to CD News and I can get those questions to them. I did want to promote that we will have 3 more webinars coming up in the beginning of November. One will cover Builders Club, which is our middle school service leadership program. One will cover K-Kids. And I think the third one is Key Leader. All at the beginning are the first 3 weeks of November there, right before Thanksgiving. So take a look at CD News. Now that you've signed up for this one, you will get a reminder for those webinars. You're ready to go. All you'll have to do is click the link to join. But please tell your other members that these videos are available, and we love to have people live. And we will be giving away those pad folios at every single webinar. So if you don't win this time, you can win next time.
And they're good quality. I've used mine for years.
And we have new ones. So if you have the old one, you can win a new one. The new ones are black and the old ones are brown. So you can have 2. Anyway, thank you so much for being here this evening. We're not going to keep you any longer. As soon as I can, I will be getting this recording along with the PowerPoint and the link to the policies that Chris spoke with up on our website. I am in Western North Carolina. I am a little busy with disaster relief as well. So patient with me. When it is up, you will see that is available. I will show you in CD News. Stay safe, everybody, and thanks so much for being here. Good night.
Glad to see you, Leah.
Thank you, Don. Well done.
Take care.
Thank you, Leah.